Hey there! Welcome to Retro Reloaded. I'm your host Lance, and each week I tackle a retro game shaped by your picks. If you want a chance to choose next week's game or unlock exclusive bonus episodes and polls, join me on Patreon at patreon.com/retroreloaded. There's even a free tier to dip your toes in. Big thanks for all of your love and support. It means the world to me. Now let's hit the start button and reload those retro vibes.
History of Shining Force: Resurrection of the Dark Dragon. Released in 2004 for the Game Boy Advance, Shining Force: Resurrection of the Dark Dragon is a remake and reimagining of the original Shining Force from 1992 for the Sega Genesis. Developed by Amusement Vision and published by Sega, the remake introduced the classic tactical RPG to a new generation while modernizing several systems. Rather than being a one-to-one remaster, Resurrection of the Dark Dragon expanded on the original's foundation with new characters, additional story content, rebalanced combat, and quality-of-life improvements designed to smooth out the difficulty spikes of early 90s strategy games. At a time when tactical RPGs were experiencing a resurgence, thanks to franchises like Fire Emblem and Final Fantasy Tactics, this remake served both as a nostalgic return for longtime fans and an accessible entry point for newcomers. It preserved the charm and structure of the original while acknowledging modern expectations for pacing, narrative clarity, and player choice.
Before we jump into the episode, I wanted to give a quick shout out to the awesome supporters over on Patreon who help keep Retro Reloaded going. Huge thanks to the 64-bit legend, our legendary supporter Zero, for always being consistent and such an awesome supporter of the show. Also, our 16-bit adventurers, Tetrafoli, Marcus Q, thank you so much for helping the show every month. You're always very supportive, and I appreciate you. And then, of course, our 8-bit explorers, Werkin Warden, Gaming Quarterly, and Anthony T. Thank you so much for your help. Everything counts, and I appreciate your support. And then, of course, just everybody who listens to the show, who likes the show on YouTube, Patreon, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all these different places where you watch, listen to the show. Thank you for supporting me there. Leaving comments helps a lot. Liking, engaging, all these things. So appreciate your involvement. It's been really great. And if you're ever interested, there's a free tier on Patreon. It's just it's a good way to get involved. And of course, our Discord, Retro Reloaded Discord, is a really great way to be involved in the community. So thank you all for keeping retro gaming alive. All right, guys, with everything out of the way, we got two guests on today. One of the guests you might know and you might love. It's Sunnyside, a.k.a. SummerSetBanjo. Welcome back to the show.
Hello, I'm always glad to be back.
And then for our second guest is a brand new guest. He goes by the name of Mike. Welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, Mike, I know that you were telling me before we started recording that you do a little bit of podcasting in the retro gaming sphere yourself. Do you want to tell us a little bit about it?
I would love to. So the last 3 years been doing a podcast with a good friend of mine called The Old Switcheroo, Gaming Retro with Mike and JMO. And we sort of decided to focus on the idea of having games that you don't get into the situation of talking about a bunch of different games, of retro games that are all hard to get a hold of in different ways. And so we just focus on games that are on Nintendo Switch Online's Nintendo Classic service.
Yes. Yeah. So that is I would agree, that is a kind of an issue sometimes with retro gaming, right? Is that if you're going to not be pirating or you're not going to be emulating or any of these things, that might be frowned upon. Sometimes some of these classics are very difficult to get a hold of. So like if you're just you want to buy it from a store or like Steam, like Nintendo Switch Online, it's like some of these classics are just really difficult. So that's kind of cool that you kind of just cover the stuff that like people can easily access. I think that's interesting.
Yeah, and it gives it a little bit of a focus. It's not choosing from all games. We've got like 300 to work with. Some of those
Yeah.
kind of are things that I don't think, or at least Pokemon Snap for the N64 was something that I remember trying to emulate years ago, and I couldn't get it to just work. So some of these are things
Oh,
that
yeah.
kind of there's not a good alternative. And obviously, a really weird decision from their part was to roll out the Virtual Boy with an accessory, and that's really not a thing that like emulation isn't quite the same thing, even if you
Yeah.
had it.
Yeah, I just find it baffling that they never did it for the 3DS. I would have thought that would have been tailor made for Virtual Boy emulation, but that's just me.
Yeah. Yeah, and another good or hard system, like if you're going to emulate, would be the Nintendo Wii. That is not a like controller based system. For maybe for some of the games you can use a controller, but for some of them it's like specifically you need to have kind of the motion controls with the Wiimote. So yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting
Yeah,
to see
cool.
how they expand that service going forward.
Yeah, I really hope they do. I think Nintendo knows that there's money sitting there. I don't know where their resources are allocated. If they want to allocate more resources to getting some of these games on the Nintendo Switch Online, or if they're just kind of interested in just doing new releases. I'm not really sure how much money they make. I'm sure they do. They got to make some money from this NSO thing,
Yeah,
right? Like,
you do, although it's also really nicely priced. So it's, I think, from the US for the full service, they kind of have like two tiers. You can get a
okay,
family plan that has 8 accounts on it for like around $100 a year,
okay.
and
So
that is,
within it. Oh, sorry.
I would say, and that's not like, okay, 8 people have to be in your household like they're doing like a Netflix thing. That is wherever. So like, um, my wife's Australian. Her family is on the same plan as us, and they are in a different country.
Wow.
Yeah,
I didn't.
it's
Wow.
crazy.
I didn't know it was a subscription-based model. I assumed that you just buy each game individually.
No, that was the Virtual Console. They sadly got rid of that with the introduction of the NSO with the Switch.
How much is it a month? You said 100?
It's like 100 a year
100 a year. Oh, okay.
for eight
Yeah, no,
people.
that's
Yeah.
completely reasonable. That's completely reasonable. And like a Switch One nowadays, you can use a Switch One, right, for most games.
Um. Yeah, I think everything but the GameCube games will work on the Switch One.
Okay. Yeah. But the GameCube games, that's kind of a big deal to me. I would love the GameCube. The Switch 2 is just a little bit out of the price range right now. I think
Mhm.
it's like kind of what's a new one cost? $5.99, $4.99?
I think it was. I think it was right around there. I'm trying to remember what it was, and I think there's been worry worries that the price would go up.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yikes.
Yeah.
Not easy, not an easy entry point. For a lot of people, at least in my opinion, they're if love Nintendo, you might just save up, and that's like kind of the big gift of the year for the family. But it's you're competing with what PlayStation, which is what at $4.99 or something. I don't know what a PS5 is
Yeah.
right
I
now.
I really on it honestly, and this is the difference between me and my co-host. I
Yeah.
play it docked on my TV effectively all the
Okay.
time. If I could just get a cheaper version that didn't have to have a screen and was just a little box that would plug into my TV, I would be thrilled. Whereas he is like
Yeah.
always on that on the go. Like we have
Yeah.
two very different play styles on that, and I would love to just have it be cheaper because I'd rather play it on TV.
Yeah, I think there needs to be an entry point for it. I mean, I know, you can make the argument for inflation and tariffs and all that stuff. But when it comes down to the nitty-gritty, people have a limited amount of income and they're going to spend it on probably one of those consoles. I would imagine most people would not be buying both. Maybe some people would be buying, or most would be buying both, but I would assume most would be buying one and then just kind of playing that one. I'm kind of a PC guy myself. I've always been a PC guy. Not always. I'd say like starting in 2006, 5, I started to kind of become a PC guy, but Um,
Yeah.
and it's hard to argue with that because PC has access to most games in general.
One of the cool features of GameCube's NSO is that they actually let you play online. So, like, if you actually wanted to do like Mario Kart Double Dash multiplayer or F-Zero GX multiplayer online with other people, you can finally do that, which is really
Yes.
cool.
And
Also,
yeah.
I hate to interrupt, but Poffle is wanting to know if he can join, if he's too late.
Yeah, Poffle can join. Is he in the?
Yeah, he's in
we'll
general
just
chat.
drop in. 1 second. Poffle. Hey, how's it going, Poffle?
Good.
Good to see you, man. So basically, we were just just to kind of get you up to speed. We're talking about retro gaming and the accessibility for customers. We're talking about how the Nintendo Switch Online has kind of allowed a lot of people access to games that they wouldn't have access to normally. Because Mike
Oh,
here, his podcast is about retro gaming in the Nintendo Switch Online store. So yeah, we were kind of covering that topic.
And
oh,
feel free to introduce yourself a little bit for the audience.
oh, hey, I am Popple. I was the guest star and technically sort of guest host for the 3D platforming podcast episode. So,
Yeah,
is this the Shining Force episode or not?
it is. This is kind of a preamble, I would
Okay,
say. Yeah.
I get you. I get you.
Yeah, and I will say the other weird part with the service, like, it is how I played Shining Force, because for reasons that feel, having grown up in the 90s, it feels really weird that Nintendo Classics as a service includes the Sega Genesis console and some of its games.
Very interesting. So they have access to like rights to that, or was it bought, or what it like how that worked? Do you know?
I'm not sure how, and they kind of have trickled games out on there. So they don't have, like I said, it's a little bit over 300 games across every console that's on there, so it's not everything. But they do have
Yeah.
Sonic games, or a solid chunk of. Right, I say Sonic because they lean really heavily into the Sonic part of that, which is
Yeah.
strange because they
Yeah.
got Sonic 2 and Sonic Spinball, and that's it. But like all the sound
Not
effects,
even Sonic 1?
no, it's really. I don't know how they make their decisions. It is weird, and we take what we get from that.
I don't know. I
If I
think
had
I'd
to,
rather play
Weird.
Sonic 3D Blast than Sonic Spinball.
yeah, if I had to assume, it would be something to do with the rights or of having the games or something. I'm sure Sega and
I
Sonic
think
are
it
kind of
might have
tightly knitted.
I think it might also have to do with, yeah, we'll license you Sonic 2 and Spinball, but like we got the rest of the Genesis games remade for Origins, and we kind of want to sell that. So soap on a rope for y'all.
Yeah, that I could see that. Yeah, I could see that. So yeah, maybe they don't want to cannibalize their audience, and that's a perfectly understandable position. So yeah, let's get into it. So Mike, you played Shining Force through the NSO store, and that's kind of how we got on this topic. Yeah, so I didn't play the OG Shining Force this last few weeks. I actually played, which funny enough to me, I didn't know that Shining Force Resurrection of the Dark Dragon, or is that I think Resurrection of the Dark Dragon was a remake. I had no idea that was. I played it and I beat it, and then I looked it up and I was like, "Oh, this is a remake to the original." I thought it was a sequel or something.
Nope.
So,
Yeah.
very
Fun.
interesting.
Meanwhile, I've only played the Genesis original.
Oh, then
Okay.
this will definitely comp there. Now, funny enough, the GBA remake was actually done by Arcade Vision, which was the arcade division of Sega. They were the team that did House of the Dead 2, Super Monkey Ball, and F-Zero GX. And after they had wrapped up on those particular
Really?
games, they worked on this Shining Force remake. And funny
Not
enough,
gonna
it was
lie, those
actually
are completely different. Those
yeah,
games are way different than this one.
yeah. Funny enough, it was actually the team that actually pitched doing a remake of Shining Force because they felt like we never have done an RPG before. And since we are no longer, have our own console, the Sega Dreamcast died around that point. They were like, let's, let's bring back one of our old RPG IPs and remake it for one of these consoles that we're actually working on.
Yeah. Yeah, and Shining Force is a name that I've heard, like, in passing a lot. Like, it's not a game that I ever was familiar with back in the day, but, when I started doing this podcast, that name kept coming up, like, Shining Force this, Shining Force that. I'm like, "What is this game? Like, what is so great about this game?" And they're like, "It's one of the best, like, original, like, tactical RPGs and all this stuff." And there's definitely some sustenance to that, and I want to say it's not similar to any really of the other, like, tactical RPGs I've played. It's got some differences, but I would
Mhm.
say those differences are good. And
Yeah.
I'll kinda go into that, in a bit. So, well, how about we start with kind of your guys' backstory and how you started playing this game, why you became a fan of it, and, yeah, we'll start with Mike.
Yeah, so this was one of the first games that we played for the podcast I do. And it was interesting for me going into it because I didn't know much about it beyond my co-host let me know, like, it's going to be an RPG. And I am not typically too drawn to RPGs just sort of as a genre. Um, and actually, to then go into it and have it instead be this much more tactical position based thing started to shift over to feeling much more like a strategy game, and as someone who in the past enjoys things like StarCraft and stuff like that, which granted is real time versus turn based,
Yeah.
actually veered this into a genre much more in line with my tastes, um, and ended up being this really pleasant surprise early on, where it's enough game that I haven't beaten it because having enough time to get through all of it is its own task, but it was this just this sort of game that I didn't really think of as consoles having, since I am also more heavily a PC gamer. Um,
Right.
and so this was something that just, especially for someone that moves at other people's houses, it's not exactly the game you roll out for that.
Yeah.
So it was a very pleasant surprise and was a lot of fun. And this the sort of game that the one downside of going through and playing a bunch of games is I didn't have time to go through all of it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it does take some time to get through it. It's not especially if you're doing like a times one speed, this game takes some time. So I get that. How long were you playing it for, do you think? How far did you get? I'm kind of curious.
The third chapter.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's
And
eight.
some of the later chapters are a little bit shorter, so I don't know where that lands you. Maybe that's halfway, possibly. Not really sure.
Yeah,
Okay.
and then for this, I replayed the first chapter this week.
Nice. And then how about you, Patful? Want to tell us your backstory on Shining Force?
All right, so it's a bit of a mix. I will say I first encountered the game on the PC Sega Smash Pack 2. I had basically no idea what I was doing because I was a single age digit at the time. And I named my dude Sonic because, of course.
Right.
And I barely remember anything else except now we fast forward to when I had tracked down an actual physical copy of the game about a decade or two later. I should mention 2000s kid here, but I did grow up with a hand me down Sega Genesis from my mom, who I believe had the Lion King bundle, so it was a Model 2. So, like, if you wonder how the hell have I played all of these, it's not just that it was not just that it was a hand me down. I also like have always enjoyed going to flea markets and finding games that way. And also my mom was like, one of those who was very paranoid about like games being violent. She was always conscientious about like checking the ratings and such. And censorship policies of the 90s meant that you didn't really have to worry about that aside from like the occasional exploding Hitler head in Bionic Commando, which I did not have as a kid. And slowly winding my way back to that, the Shining Force was a game I encountered off and on through various collections, like the PS2 and PS3 ones, PSP. I finally found a physical copy of, and so I finally sat my butt down and I played through the entirety of Shining Force. And yeah, that is my origin story for it.
Neat.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Uh,
So a little bit of backstory for me. I've never actually played Shining Force, uh, which probably makes me the odd person out here in this podcast, but I've always heard it being talked about, especially when it comes to discussions like Shining Force 3 on the Sega Saturn. Um, but yeah, I've always been fascinated with games, and I've always been interested in looking up the history of some of the stuff. To briefly kind of cover a little bit of the background of the game itself, Shining Force was developed by two companies, Climax Entertainment and another company called Sonic Co., later known as Sonic Software, though you might all know it as Camelot Studios.
Camelot! Yes. It and
And
Golden Sun have a ton of DNA, and
yeah,
I'll stop there.
yeah. Yeah, well, in fact, a lot of the people that worked on Shining Force would later on work on Golden Sun. Now, one of the interesting things is that the reason why it's a tactical RPG but feels so different from other tactical RPGs is because the person that was in charge of the development of Shining Force, he played Fire Emblem and hated it. He thought it was too slow, too difficult, and just wasn't fun. And so he basically tried to make his game pretty much as different as he could from Fire Emblem. He actually liked Dragon Quest a lot more, and so he took a lot more inspiration from that. But he said in interviews that his primary inspirations were Disney movies and mangas.
Given the art style and overall aesthetics, I can absolutely see it.
Kind of understand. And by the way, if it sounds weird, I lost power. So I'm on my phone, so I'm not going to have my notes for cast right now. And the
Uh-oh.
sound quality is going to be a little bit lower, but that's fine. Yeah, no, we can roll with it. Yeah, so basically, I noticed that it was a lot different than these other tactical RPGs. Like there was a huge difference to me as far as pacing and simplicity and um, just the vibe of it all was way different. And some people might say that's a good thing. Some people might say that's a bad thing. I'm kind of curious on what your guys' opinions on the change of the pacing and the complexity of the game.
So, the vibe of the game is the first thing I want to address because I'll be honest, I am the resident heretic here. I will say it is kind of the one thing that kept me going through the game because the overall simplicity of it meant that I didn't have to do much in the way of thinking for most of it, which meant the combat was actually my least favorite part of the game. I mostly preferred just like going through the towns, meeting the NPCs, and seeing what kind of wacky shenanigans would unfold. I really liked seeing our dude turn into a chicken at one point. I liked the king who had to run an entire town on his own, up to and including being the shopkeeper. And the fact that there were hidden dudes on any given map that you could recruit. I missed several characters. Like, I did not get to recruit Yojimbo, who's like in some obscure corner of some obscure map, and I kick myself for that because, dang, I love his samurai aesthetic. I am mad that I didn't get him. I love the character designs in general. I love the fact that you can recruit centaurs, a werewolf, griffins. I love that there's just an adorable baby dragon in the party, a robot, a, another bird guy, and if I remember correctly, a psychic floating jellyfish who is the best caster in the game, and a mole wearing a a mole wearing a stormtrooper helmet who is the worst character in the game.
So it kind of sounds like you enjoy the RPG aspects more than the actual tactical part of the game. Like you enjoyed kind of those like role playing elements.
Absolutely. I love the writing, I love the character designs. The characters themselves are not terribly involved due to the period. This was not even like Final Fantasy 2 was out, and by 2 I mean 4. I don't know if Final Fantasy 4
Yeah,
was
sure.
out at the time. I think
Right.
actually yeah, it was. What year did Shining Force come out?
Um,
92
not
or
sure.
93 in North America.
Oh, so yeah, Final Fantasy 2 was out by then. And by 2, I mean 4. And yeah, the Sega was not an especially RPG heavy system. It was the action game system. You bought it for Sonic, you bought it for Golden Axe, you bought it for things like Gunstar Heroes or Contra Hardcore or Dynamite Heady or just any number of awesome Musha. Just if it's an action game, there's a solid chance you bought the Genesis for that.
Yeah.
The if you wanted if you wanted RPGs, you would have wanted the SNES, but there were good RPGs on the Genesis, and the Shining games were among them. There was also Super Hydlide, which, yes, Hydlide got several sequels. One of them got localized, and it is actually a solid game if you're willing to endure a lot of grind. There's. Oh, I forget if Starflight can be called an RPG, but we also got a Genesis port of Might and Magic 2. Just, I
This game specifically, Shining Force, is it better, worse as far as the complexity?
I think of it closer, not with tactical RPGs, but sort of the more broad RPGs that don't have that specific tactical element, even with like um, Fantasy Star, also on Genesis, or Fantasy Star 4.
the Fantasy Star games rule, by the way. I love them.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think something that is being much more, as discussed, that those feel something like that feels more story heavy. Breath of Fire feels more story heavy. This really does
Yeah.
feel more about the tactics. I think some of that also just stems from the fact that I was the first time playing this, I was not really prepared for just how many people it would let me have. Like I was ready to do that thing of like, okay, I'm up to like 5 people, now I gotta choose who. And instead it just keeps adding more people to the party. It has a sense of scope that I think is why the characters aren't dealt with in as much depth, just because it spread this out over so many characters. And for me, I enjoy that trade off,
Mhm.
but I can see where
I
someone.
think yeah, I think Chrono Cross did something similar where they have like all sorts of different characters you can go with.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
will say, I think Shining Force does it better than Chrono Cross did just because, like, it's not a very story heavy game. Like, the plot is very basic. You can already guess within the first 10 minutes what's going to happen, and that's fine. It's a it's a skeleton upon which the writing hangs a bunch of goofy incidents and fun little gimmicks, and I like that about it.
with this game, it was really straightforward. It's like, okay, we got a dude who lost his memory, and he's in an unknown land. He's a good fighter. He wants to fight for the kingdom of Gardania, and there's a invading kingdom. He's might join the king at some point, and yeah, and then it's really simple. And then they're gonna resurrect a big dark dragon. Like that's the whole premise of the game. And so yeah, and that gets a little tiny bit more involved later on. I won't go into spoilers, but it's pretty simple.
I do like, though, there are interesting bits of world building in there that don't immediately call attention to themselves. Like, I already mentioned the robot, so the fact that there is a robot means that is sort of a spoiler, but it's not presented as a big plot twist, nor is it really spelled out that this is what happened. But there is futuristic tech scattered throughout the game world. You have like giant laser turrets that you have to take out at one point. You have robots, and it's implied that there was an apocalypse at some point, something like Adventure Time. And it's only implied in the sense that, well, this tech had to get here somehow. And the sort of diversity of the entire cast, it's like you don't do the fancy thing of, okay, so all the elves live over here. You have these centaurs living over here. You've got like the dragon dudes living over here. No, like they all are smashed together into various different civilizations, and it's not, oh yeah, this entire species has this gimmick. It's, oh yeah, this like entire town has this gimmick, and there's like centaurs and wolfmen and all this stuff in the same area. And I like that.
Between you meet these little cookie characters, and you got some comedy, and yeah, it's just, I thought it was good. There was no point in the game where I was like overridden with emotion or anything like that, like I would like on some RPGs, but it was always
Final
like
Fantasy
enjoyable,
VI.
I would say. Yeah, not like a Final Fantasy 6, but it was always enjoyable. So yeah, we kind of talked about the plot a little bit. And then, as far as the history of development, do we have any more key things that we should say, other than it was developed in 92?
I mean, there is the surprising part that this is the second game in a series.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
So Shining in the Darkness, I'm going entirely off memory here, no notes, since it's something that Jess got brought up. Shining in the Darkness was meant essentially to train the newbies at, I believe, either Sonic or Climax. And it was like, okay, we're going to show you the ropes, you're going to make a game, and we're going to publish it. And what we got was something with a very similar ethos to Shining Force, very simplified. The interface is very user friendly with all of the pictograms and everything. And it is a first person tile based dungeon crawler. There is one town, and have you played Arcana
I have not.
on Super Nintendo? So that game did a thing where like there were multiple towns, but there wasn't really an overworld exactly. And you had this panorama view that you would turn around for the town. Like you were basically standing in place and spinning to navigate a town. The entire game takes place in two locations for Shining in the Darkness: the town of Thornwood, the castle of Thornwood, and the dungeon. The dungeon itself is arranged in a very Metroidvania-esque way. You gather items to unlock other parts of the dungeon. You meet party members and guest party members either inside or outside of the dungeon. There's a ton of fun little cutscenes that are animated like an anime or cartoon.
Mhm.
And you only have two party members, and of the two, Pyra's kind of the only one. that has a personality, but she is endearing enough. And the characters that you do get to meet are very memorable. They're simple but memorable. And also, the dwarf from Golden Axe is one of the shopkeepers.
Oh,
And
neat.
one more thing before I hand the mic over, because it's a cute detail I have to mention. When you go into the menu during the shop, the little window in which the shopkeeper in the background are in gets shoved aside for the menu, and there's an animation of the shopkeeper going, "Oh!"
So one thing that is kind of interesting about the development of the original Shining Force was that duties were actually split between Climax and Sonic Software. One studio handled like the writing and programming of the game, and then the other studio handled like the graphics and animation.
Huh. How much
Okay.
communication was in the two?
I'm not really sure. I mean, technically, both studios was under the Sega umbrella, but I don't know, like how far apart they were geographically or how they communicate and stuff like that. I mean, since this is like late '80s, early '90s, I would imagine that they would either have to have like in-person meetings or like very early fax and email.
Yeah, something like that. Technology was a bit different back then. We kind of mentioned in passing about the interesting characters of the game, and I kind of wanted to bring those up because I thought the characters in the game were so diverse and so interesting. Like when you see a cool character in this game, you're like, "Ooh, I hope I can have that guy join my party." Like 99% of the time, that cool character is going to join your party, and they have these really cool sprites, and they look cool, and they have different backstories. So I kind of wanted to ask, what's your favorite like cast to run with? Who's your favorite team setup? And maybe we'll start with Mike here.
I mean, I wouldn't say I have a favorite team set in part because you just kind of. I don't think I hit the point where I had to cut people, which is ridiculous. Um, or at least for the most part. I think if in terms of characters that specifically draw me the most, probably are as a group the knights. There's just something fun about the all of the knights are in fact centaurs, just as a concept that just adds a funness to this for me.
I wonder if
Right.
that's
Yeah,
a
there's a lot of
reference
centaurs in this
to.
game.
I wonder if there's a. I wonder if that's like a reference to the chess piece being a horse. The knights are all horse people, essentially.
Maybe. There's a lot of centaur in this game, like lots, a lot more than I thought there would be. Like you get like a couple in the beginning,
Centaurs are
then
cool.
you just keep getting more. Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, like I felt like at the end of the game, like a third of my cast was centaurs. Like not the ones that I chose, but like the teammates that I had.
Yeah. One little fun little bit of trivia that you might find interesting, Lance, since you work in game, since you've done game development stuff. The original Shining Force, in order to get a little extra power, a little extra resources out of the Sega Genesis, they did some hardware tricks to not only draw power from the main Genesis itself, but also from the hardware built into the Genesis that was meant to serve as backward compatibility for the Master System. So that way, it was actually like drawing resources from both to make the game run even better, both in like hardware, gameplay, and sound. Now, funny enough, remake, the development team that worked on that did something similar. They took advantage of not only the base GBA hardware, but they also did a similar kind of trick to try to take advantage of the Game Boy and Game Boy Color backwards compatibility that the GBA had, just to draw as much power as they could.
Yeah, that's so
I had no
interesting
idea
because
that was a thing you
what's
could
weird.
do.
I did notice some frame rate issues on certain maps within certain like when you start getting that big cast of characters and you're fighting like a huge cast of characters, it felt like there was some sort of lagginess, and I don't know if that was intentional for the game. Like maybe they did that on purpose, but it felt like a little like not super smooth. I don't know if you guys had the same experience or not.
I think with how I was
I
playing it, I
don't.
didn't notice that.
I don't remember it, but it probably happened. There are a few battles with a lot of participants, and presumably, like a lot of the RNG is presumably still going at all times during it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the reason they would have to draw all those resources is just literally because of the number of people on the map. And I know these tactical RPGs sometimes tend to do that, like they just want to place as many enemies as possible. You know, I think it's a cool concept, but sometimes in practice, when you're placing that many enemies, like some battles feel like they could draw out a little bit, especially if you lose. Like if you lose a really long battle, it can feel bad. I'm not a huge fan of like high numbers of enemies in a tactical RPG game just because of the consequences of losing kind of suck. But Vandal Hearts was also another one where you got a lot of enemies on the screen, but the battles were super long. And if maybe if you didn't want to spend 30 minutes to 40 minutes in one battle, it could be kind of an issue. But that's kind of a personal preference for me than it is like an actual issue. Maybe some people would prefer like an hour long battle with like 100 units. I'm not sure. How do you guys feel about that?
I think one thing this has going for it is I didn't find losing as punishing as I had expected going into it. And I think that's just, I'm used to so many games roughly of the RPG kind of style or the strategy game kind of style where it's like if you lose, you are set back to your last save point. And
That
one of the neat things that this did was if you lose, you still preserve the experience that you had earned during that battle.
yeah.
And so if you have a long battle and you lose at the very end, you have the difficulty of bringing back any characters that got knocked out, but you also have done all that leveling up. And so that it makes it a bit more forgiving because it doesn't feel like you've wasted all of that time. And when you go back, it's a little bit easier because maybe in that time a couple characters are up a level more and they're coming in a bit stronger. So it balanced out in a way that I think a lot of other games have felt much more punishing when you lose.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
probably
and not
because
only
the guy had a bad experience with Fire Emblem and was like, "We're not going to do that."
yeah, yeah, and not only that, there's certain tactics games where your characters die permanently after you lose a battle, like they're dead. you know, so you like either reset your console or you like I don't know move forward with your dead. They're gone forever. So this game is it's not that punishing. I think it's really only punishing in the beginning when you don't have money because it just costs a lot of money to resurrect your characters. But later on, it's kind of a non-issue. I think actually I did lose some money though dying for I think maybe a good portion of my money was like chunked out for some reason. Maybe it's a percentage based thing, but that's like the biggest punishment. It's not as bad as like I think like FF Tactics or something, So
Yeah,
yeah. So
Mostly,
let's oh go ahead.
mostly, mostly the punishment for losing just comes from tedium. Like, oh god, I have to fight those stupid puppet clowns again.
The puppet clown. Are you talking about Mishala or that fight with her or her puppets?
I think so.
Yeah, she like summons puppets, and there's a kidnapped kid or something. I think. But yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. So, do you guys have a favorite fight? Maybe without spoiling too much. But do you have a favorite fight in this game?
Probably the aforementioned laser turrets thing. That was such a neat little introductory. That was just such a neat gimmick they introduced for that. Because, like, you had this. They didn't fire every turn. You basically had to get all your dudes out of the way of the line of fire before the thing went off. And it made that particular fight very tense in a way that was actually really fun. That would be
How
my
did you
favorite.
deal with that? I'm kind of curious. What was your strategy for the laser cannon?
Oh god, it's been like a decade since I last played it.
Okay, because for me that was quite what I did is I waited for it to kind of go off and then
like hurt all the enemies. Then I went over the bridge to try to finish them off. That was kind of my strategy.
I think that's valid.
What about you, Mike? Would you have a favorite fight?
The one that jumps out to me is Shade Abbey.
Shade Abbey. I'm trying to remember this one.
Yeah, I think it would have been like chapter 2.
What sticks out about it to you?
I think part of it is that it was a very, just from the gameplay approach, it was a very good battle in terms of using it to grind up levels. And it also has a bit of good atmosphere to it that I don't know how far I want to go down these specific spoilers on that, but it's
okay.
It would be the Abbey has a graveyard right next to it that comes into play.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, so there in this game you can't. It's not like you can go into random battles, right? Like you, at least not that I'm aware of, and you can't just like grind up your characters. Like when you defeat a battle, you're on to the next part of the story, pretty much. Is that correct?
Yeah, so that one is a relatively close quarters combat, so you don't have the first half of the battle is just slowly cycling through, moving everyone across the map. And then you pretty much just leave before you finish, and you take all of the experience that you've earned out of that, and then just do it again.
Oh, okay. So, I never thought about that strategy of grinding up your characters. You leave the battle before you finish, then you just redo the battle and you keep your experience.
Exactly. And so a lot of those battles are very spread out, and it would be obnoxious. And I think it was sort of a realization I had after losing and going, wait a minute, I still have all the XP out of that. I can just do this on purpose now.
Wow. Yeah. See, I was thinking to myself, I'm like, what if you get stuck? Like, what if you're at a point in the game and you just can't? I mean, the game is like relatively easy, so it's hard to get like hard stuck. But you could potentially get hard stuck and be like, what do I do? Because there's no conventional way to grind the game. I guess like you just have to keep butting your head until you get enough experience, die enough, and then maybe go through it that way.
Yeah, and I think a little bit of it is, it also helps just since the healers are so difficult to level up. They don't get XP at the same, or it's hard to get them XP at the same kind of rates because they're not killing anything. And so it was nice to just have a controlled thing of, I would like to get my healers leveled up to the rest of the party.
Yeah. And you brought up a good point there. That was kind of one of my issues with the game, was that there are certain characters you have that will get way behind compared to the other party members. Like they're going to be like 20 levels behind your other party members. Which is kind of wild because like healing doesn't do much, and the slower characters, they kind of get stuck in the back, and the fast characters are up ahead battling, unless you keep all your characters like kind of together, which is a strategy to do on some of the maps. But eventually characters do end up out leveling other characters due to these factors. Like healing doesn't give you much experience, buffing doesn't give you much experience. So some of your characters end up becoming useless if they're attack characters. Like if they're characters that actually attack something, they end up becoming useless. The healers are always useful, but yeah, it was kind of one of my gripes with the game, I would say.
Yeah, and that's why it was really useful for me, was just to get them caught up relatively quickly.
Yeah. So there's also characters you'll get like in the middle of the story, and some of them will be like under leveled kind of compared to the fights you're doing. A little bit of a spoiler, later on you get a baby dragon, and this baby dragon's just super weak, and I tried to use him, and it was just like he was doing like 1 damage to the enemies, and I was like, oh, uh he's useless, like I can't use him. So certain characters end up carrying the team. Like I think I had like 4 characters that were kind of like my carries, and then the other ones were just like there to be like what do you want to call it, like fodder, cannon fodder. So, but don't get me wrong, the characters I had strong were really cool. Like they were awesome characters. Like the werewolf that Pathful mentioned, I loved Xylo. Xylo was sick. And And then obviously Max was strong. And then who else did I have on that team that was really strong? One of my Birdmen was good. Balroy, something like that. And then I think I had and Zuika. Zuika was really cool. He's an assassin. He's sick. I like his character. Like the way the assassin works is that when he gets low health, he takes off his armor and he becomes like a super assassin. So he's kind of like doing this like last stand thing and taking out enemies with before they take him out. It's really cool. I like it. Yeah. So what about maybe a favorite character, like specifically? Because we kind of talked about teams. Do you guys have like a specific character?
Definitely Xylo, just because of his aesthetic.
Yeah, Xylo's sick. So cool. It's hard to beat a werewolf with claws. Like it's like what is he got the Teenage Mutant
You
Ninja
got the
Turtle guy?
Wolverine,
Like
Shredder, Wolverine,
He got like
that kind of
Shredderine.
thing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's awesome. What about you, Mike? You got a favorite character?
I don't think so. I think for me, it does feel much more like it is this team, and they're all kind of the pieces in it.
Okay. Yeah. So no specifics, just like, okay, this is my team and I like this team. Yeah, for sure. Your composition. You liked your composition. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess we kind of talked about pacing a little bit, and this game is, I would say, faster paced than other RPGs, but I still feel like it could have been sped up a little bit. Do you guys feel that way?
Yes, definitely. Especially that puppet section. That was awful.
I think
Yeah, this
I'm
is one of those
alright
games
with.
Go ahead, sorry.
Go ahead. I'll let you finish that thought.
Oh, no. Basically, I was just gonna say, this is one of those games you could put it 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, and it will not affect the game negatively because there's no issues with like time-based mechanics. Like you're not having to defeat a battle within a certain time frame. You know what I mean? So I felt like it could have been sped up, or maybe an option. Like they could have put it in the options. Like, okay, do you want the game to be sped up this much? They did do it for text, but the text was ironically already pretty fast, and you can make the text faster with pressing the button. So to me, I thought that it could have just used that mechanic. And maybe I'm just maybe I'm getting too old for some of these games, but like I feel like the same way with older turn-based games, it's like, can we just kind of like speed it up a little bit, especially if I'm just pressing attack? Like if I'm just pressing that attack button, like let me get through it. In my opinion.
I've always
Sorry,
been the
Mike, what
same
were you going to
way.
say?
Or with it, I think one of the spots that it does get frustrating is these long moves over the map to see that one of the enemies on the far side is not going to move on their turn. There's a lot of waiting or watching them move one square far away that feels like it can go faster.
Yeah.
So,
Although for the I'm watching this and this is taking a while, none of this holds a candle to like the start of Shining Force 2 is like several minutes of mostly like cutscene on the Genesis, and it's ridiculous. And so like I have that in mind, that when I look at Shining Force, I'm like, yeah, this moves at a pretty good clip, because it never does that to me, where I'm basically just hitting A every so often to advance watching.
Ironically, I actually really liked Shining Force 2's cutscenes.
They're a bit too long.
Shining Force 2 was made for what, the Genesis as well, or?
Yes. Yeah. And I think it's, to not fully dwell on that, for me, Shining Force 2 basically was a game that playing that was mostly me going, I wish that the quality of life improvements were in the original Shining Force, rather than me enjoying Shining Force 2. And so actually, I think a lot of that made it into the Game Boy Advance version that you would have played.
Yeah. a bit of a question. Back on the subject of characters, real quick. What do you all think of the main protagonist, Max? Because he's kind of different in both the Genesis original and in the GBA version. As far as I know, he's kind of more or less a silent protagonist in the Genesis version, while in the GBA version, he's given full dialogue.
Oh wow, I had no idea. Yeah, he's kind of not a character in the original. He's just player cipher.
Yeah. So like I played the GBA, and he is a character. And he's fine. I like him. There's not a lot of depth to him. It's like he's obviously a good guy, and he's got good intentions, and he's helping people and saving the world. He's not like over the top with the personality. It's like he's kind of got that generic good guy personality. He's fine. Nothing. I wouldn't say he does a disservice to his character. He just doesn't really. He's not like a memorable character that you're going to be like, yeah, Max was so sick. Like I love Max. Like for the rest of eternity. It's just going to be like, yeah, Max, he's there. So
Really, like is from Bravely Default.
I think it kind of
Yeah.
reflects, in general, I think they added more. They decided to make him be more of a present character. I was going to say, I think also they added backstory to a lot of the other characters. I think when you're in your headquarters, you can talk to them and get information. You hear backstory stuff from them. I think at that point, which was not a thing in the Genesis. So I think it's just part of that larger, without changing anything, how they tried to add a bit more depth to characters.
Yeah.
Now, one thing is interesting. Now, this might actually be a little bit of a spoiler, but it's kind of only more of a spoiler in the Japanese version. But the character of Cain is actually Max's brother.
That would be in the GA version as well for this one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it was only in the
Uh,
Japanese version on the Genesis, but for some reason they took out that reveal in the English release of the original Shining Force.
Maybe it was for space reasons.
That's a
Maybe.
weird reveal to take out, because I feel like that was supposed to be one of the bigger ones. Like that was supposed to be one of the bigger. And it's funny because it gets like there's a character that hints at that pretty early on, like that Cain in Dark Soul and Max have some sort of connection. It doesn't really say what it is, but later on, you figure out the whole brother thing. Yeah, that's kind of weird that they would take that out. I wonder, maybe it was space reasons. I don't feel like there would be like, I don't know. It's I wonder
feel
what
like
the
there's other things you cut if you're cutting space, like, because to keep that seems much more obvious that this doesn't take up much space as a one-off. But one of the neat things in the Genesis was every time you see a bookshelf, you can check it, and it would have a list of, you'd get 2 books that were on that bookshelf, and they're all unique to every bookshelf. And that's one of those things that it's neat. It gives this world building sense. But like, I feel like you cut that before you cut plot.
right,
Yeah.
like the Max plot. Yeah, I mean the Kane plot. Yeah, for sure.
I think honestly, it's one of those cases where there just wasn't that good of a solution to it. For all we know, that could have been like they could have heavily abbreviated the bookshelves a ton. Like they had to abbreviate a lot of text in these old games because English just takes up a lot more space than Japanese does.
Interesting. Yeah, I wonder why that would be. Yeah,
I can actually
yeah,
explain it a
maybe.
bit if you want.
Yeah,
So
yeah, you can go into it a little bit.
So, Japanese has 3 writing systems. And by 3, I technically mean 2, but whatevs. Hiragana, katakana, and kanji. Kanji is all of the stuff that they stole from Chinese, and katakana and hiragana are syllabary. And at the time, most games were written in just the syllabaries because you could do that. It made it harder to read for natives and people who are still learning the language, but it was doable. it saves space. Like,
Yeah.
imagine if every syllable in the English language just took up one character instead of like, you had to spend 5 characters for a word. You could just do like 2 or 3. And as a result, you could cram a lot more Japanese text in the same space as it would take like maybe a sentence or two of English. And that's why you got a lot of stuff chalked right out of games like Final Fantasy II or the NES version of Shadowgate, where they had to translate it back from the original English into Japanese and then back into English. And a lot of the English version's original text had to be axed to save space. Just that's just how it was. Cartridge space was at a premium. It was expensive.
That makes some sense because I was thinking, because I'm a little bit familiar with the Japanese language. I was like, with the kanji, how is it saving more space? But if they're just removing that completely, because kanji, you can think of it as just a symbol means a word. So there's like tens of thousands of kanji, right? It's like, okay, well, if you're just using the hiragana and the katakana, which are just syllables, like you said, it's like having 2 alphabets. But you can only, each one is a syllable, so you only have to use like 3 versus using 10 characters for English, or whatever, for a word or whatever. So it's like, it makes sense that
And
way. I didn't know that.
sorry, yeah. Another thing is that a lot of kanji are very commonly used, enough so that you can have maybe like a sprinkling of 100 or so kanji and use that for an entire script without issue. So
Yeah.
like it would still take up less space compared to an English sentence. Like you would need maybe 4 tiles at most for your average kanji.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. So that could be it. Why they removed the whole cane bit, even though it was kind of important to the story. The minor, or the little bit of story the game has. Yeah. So I'm trying to
Of
think
course, it's
of,
always a
because I don't have my list in front of me. Go ahead.
Of course, it's always a possibility that it wasn't for space reasons, just merely a creative choice by the translators.
That is,
So
yeah.
like
We're a little. It's a bit of, we're kind of speculating a little bit because we're not really sure, but um, yeah, I don't have my list with me. I usually go over the good, the bad, and the in between. But I think I've said most of what I wanted to say. I kind of wish that the story was a little more involved. But I think it was fine for what it was. I'm glad they also kept, like, the story simple, the gameplay simple, and you're for an enjoyable ride. You're not getting into something crazy. It's something you can kind of jump in, jump out, and you're, yeah, I was playing this game, like, funny enough, like, while my wife was shopping at the store, I'm playing this game like on my handheld, uh, you know, like, in between, while she's like looking for stuff, and then it's like I can just put down the game anytime and then come back to it, and I'm having a good time. It wasn't a game that I felt like I had to be super attentive to at all times. It was fun. It was fine. So I I don't know if we want to have any more kind of final thoughts before we kind of wrap up this episode, because I'm trying to think of things that we should say before we wrap it up. Is there any final thoughts you guys have?
I honestly, it's interesting you say that because I think the pacing of the game would probably work a lot better as a portable title where you aren't paying too much attention, so all of the idle time is not as big of a deal versus like I played through it in front of a TV on an actual Genesis and my whole undivided attention was on it, complete with all the like slow panning over, wait for your dude to do one thing, and then repeat until you finally get a turn again. That was,
Yeah,
I think, that contributed a lot to my problems with the pacing.
totally. I agree.
Now, yeah. Now, if you're wanting to have a direct continuation of Shining Force's story, you can kind of continue it with Shining Force Gaiden, the final conflict. I think that kind of continues kind of more or less where the original Shining Force ends.
Isn't that where? Isn't that also the game that Shining Force CD adapted?
I don't know. Like I said, my knowledge of Shining Force is a bit spotty. Uh,
I think the CD game adapts the first two Game Gear ones.
yeah. Let me check real quick if you don't mind.
Yeah. I heard, ironically, I heard the Sega CD version is just, it's like no story. It's like just battle to battle to battle to battle, which I feel like that kind of takes away from the Shining Force game. I feel like that would defeat some of the purpose. I don't know. Is that correct with the
Yeah.
Sega CD?
Admittedly, I did not play that much of the CD version. I played maybe 2 to 5 minutes of it on an emulator, got bored, and did something else.
Oh, okay. So Shining Force Gaiden, the final conflict, is the third and final Game Gear Shining Force game, and so that one was
Okay.
not included as part of Shining Force CD.
Huh.
And
All
it
right.
basically kind of wraps up the story of both Shining Force 1 and Shining Force 2. So it's actually kind of the third part from the first two original Shining Force games.
Huh.
You said this is on the Game Gear?
Interesting.
Yeah, it's called Shining Force Gaiden: The Final Conflict. It basically wraps up both the stories of Shining Force 1 and Shining Force 2, and it features characters from both of them, including Max.
Wow. Wow. Game
I
Gear.
think it
That's
was
crazy.
Japan only, and you have to use a fan translation patch for it.
Yeah.
I feel like Game Gear was so niche. I had one when I was a kid, but I felt like there weren't that many games for it, and it was cool, but I felt like it was just always out of batteries, and we always like it just didn't hit the same way like the Nintendo Game Boy did. Even though I liked it, I liked Sonic. I had Sonic for it, and it was really fun, but it just felt limited compared to the Game Boy. I don't know if you guys had one,
Yeah,
but
though I will say about in the Game Gear's defense, like, well, A, yeah, I had one, and B, you're right about the battery. I always had to have mine plugged into the wall socket as a result, but like years later, I would go digging into the Game Gear's library via emulation, and oh my god, there are a ton of fantastic titles on there that I completely missed out on. Like, I was shocked at how good the Jurassic Park game was. Like, I was not a fan of the Genesis Jurassic Park. I've never played the Super Nintendo one, but the Game Gear one is fantastic. It is one of the best games on that console. There's also a ton of Japan only games that are shockingly good ports, like Gunstar Hero, or heck, we got a port of Rystar that's really good and includes a few new levels that are exclusive to it, substituting for ones it had to cut from the Genesis one. There's a bunch of neat little things like Tails Adventure that's kind of like a Metroidvania Wonder Boy-ish clone. There's just a ton of neat things in the Game Gear's library. I would recommend just taking the time to find a full set of Game Gear ROMs and playing that.
yeah, maybe it was just the library I had, so maybe I didn't give it a fair shake and
Yeah.
wiggle, but it was I didn't have that many games. I had like three, and I was like, well, I guess this is it. But
What was the three?
yeah,
If I may ask.
Sonic for sure was one of them. And I'm trying to remember the other two. What were some other like really big titles for the Game Gear? Because I bet they were bigger titles.
There were several Sonic ones. Sonic 1, 2, 3. Oh, wait, not 3. Chaos, Triple Trouble. Those were the four good ones. And of those four, I'd actually say 2 is not great. But I like 2. It's not great.
There was also Sonic Blast.
We don't talk about
I don't
Sonic
think that
Blast.
I don't I don't think the other two games were Sonic games, so I can't remember. But yeah, what about you, Mike? Do you have kind of any final thoughts for this Shining Force episode?
Um, a couple. So I'm going to lead with two things that I like just as nice little touches to this that add sort of give this a sense of personality to me. One is not for the Game Boy Advance, but I think for the initial subtitle on this that shows up on the game was The Legacy of Great Intention. I think is
Yeah, that's the subtitle in the Genesis version, and then the GBA version is called Resurrection of Dark Dragon.
and I don't know. There's something about that Genesis one that I like the flavor to that. It sticks with me a bit, and then the other part that I really like is the way into and out of the game. And I don't know if the Game Boy Advance does this differently because it was meant to be handheld.
The
Was
little elf girl.
yes, the elf girl that like you talk that is like welcomes you in to ask you like to kind of briefly bookend the story, and when you when you go to save, it'll ask if you're done, and if you're done, it goes back to her. Um, and in the case of playing that on Nintendo Switch Online, I then get stuck at that screen because that screen was not meant for you to go back into the game from. But
I always really liked that detail. I will mention the other Shining games on the Genesis do that. You had Shining in the Darkness had this wizard character who you actually meet in the game proper, and he had a little book that I don't think was meant to contain the story of the game, but he does have it. And he also will be like, "Hey, welcome back to Thornwood." And the second Shining Force had this witch who basically cursed you, and you had to help her out with something involving the game's plot. I did not finish that game, but I thought that was a neat little. I thought that was a neat little introductory gimmick.
Yeah, and I think the witch actually, if you will, you can start back the game back up from that end screen. But I just the girl with the book is just it has this nice. It sets a tone as like a fantasy story thing from that in a way that I appreciate. That's a lot nicer than just like a load screen.
It's really cute.
Yeah,
I wish
I
Golden
think
Sun
we
had
also
done
should.
something similar.
I think we should also mention that the game, at least the GBA version, has a new game plus, I think, option for it.
Oh.
I don't think I'll pursue it, but it's kind of cool. It's like, oh, I have this character that's under leveled. Now give me new game plus. Maybe I can actually level this character, you know? So I think that's kind of cool. I got a minor complaint. I wish Yogurt was like, I know he's a meme character that doesn't do any damage, but I kind of wish that you could do something special with him and he would be like super good at like this one thing. You know what I mean? Instead of just being like a dead weight or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Yogurt, by the way, if you haven't met him yet, Mike, he's just like this little mole. What is he, like a mole rat? Or like not a mole rat, but like a mole or something, and he wears like a weird hat, and he I don't know, he speaks Japanese, I think.
I want to say gerbil. Like I know the character, but I have missed the character in my playthrough.
I think you get him later on, so I don't think you missed him yet, but you're getting close. I think he auto joins the party, or I don't know, but yeah, that was my only minor things I wanted to mention. The new game plus feature is cool for people who want to do that. I don't think I will, considering the story isn't that involved. But yeah, no, yeah. So let's do kind of the rating,
Sure.
and
I wanted to ask a quick question.
I don't want. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Quick question on a issue that I had that I want to know how the Game Boy Advance handles, because I think it does it better. Which was one of the frustrating things playing the Genesis version is each of your characters can only hold basically the weapon they're equipped with, and there's a huge amount of juggling weapons or items every time you find something. Because if you find something and your inventory is full, like your character's inventory is full, you have to then go back, give your item to somebody else, then try to pick up the new item because it always comes into you. Shining Force 2
Yes.
fixed that. I was wondering how the Game Boy Advance handles its inventory.
Yeah, so the way it does it is that there are 4 main slots that your character has, and these are for, I think, weapons and armor. Then there's 4 extra slots that's for like items, like the herbs, the potions, the usable items in battle. And then you have an item box. So like if your inventory is AKA full, what it will do is that the item will go in your item box, and then you can, outside of battle, switch out items or whatever. So you're not like, if you try to pick up an item, you're not stuck like trying to pick it up. You'll pick it up, but it will be in that box. And then once you get out of the battle, you can, equip your character with it or whatever.
That is wonderful to know that they improved that.
Nice compromise. Shining in the Darkness,
Yeah.
I think, had that same issue.
I think 2 at least would go if your inventory was full and you tried to pick something up, it would let you know of, okay, it's being handed off to someone else instead. So it wasn't, you saw the shuffle stuff later, but at least it wasn't right when you find stuff really annoying.
Yeah, I get annoyed by limited inventories in certain games. Some games it's actually adds to the game. I would say like Resident Evil, the original Resident Evils, like it adds to, having to choose the better and whatever. And but like this game or games like this where you're a ton of items, like it's really annoying to have to like try to use an item, or like, I think what was it? Dragoon? What is it? What's the game called? Dragoon something?
Legend of Dragoon.
Legend of Dragoon had the same issue where it's like you had like 20 items of space, and you're always running into this like, what do I do with this, or like whatever, or should I use this or whatever. And I think that's for an RPG, I think that's an annoying mechanic, considering like a good portion of the game is like coming up onto new items that you can use, so, but yeah, very, very interesting. I didn't know the original had that issue. I'm glad they fixed it for the GBA.
I was hopeful because even for 2, I think that improved, and it started letting you know with new weapons who can actually use them and how much it would power them up. Whereas the first one, you really just need the manual.
Yeah. You know what? I actually want to ask you guys, have you seen the GBA graphics? Like what it looks like?
I've seen what it looks like, at least, but I've never gotten to play it.
I think I've only seen some stills.
Okay.
It
I was going to
certainly
say,
looks a
like,
lot
what do you
more
prefer?
colorful.
Yeah, it's a lot more lighter, lot brighter, a lot more colorful. The sprites are more detailed, I would say, but they're also a different style. So I was kind of curious if you guys preferred the OG look or the new look.
I go the original, I think.
I kind of feel like I like the colors of the GBA version, but I kind of slightly prefer the art style of the original. If you could like combine like the colors of the GBA and the graphics of the GBA, but still keep like the character's art design closer to the original, I think that'd be my preferred form.
Yeah. 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 So with the original, they serious, I would say. And the GBA more like, not kiddish, but like less serious looking. Does that feel right? Does that sound right?
Yeah.
Okay. Because the GBA screen was very hard to see. So before the SP came out, every GBA game was like very washed out, just so it would be easier to see what's going on.
Hmm.
No. Yeah.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
they didn't have a backlit
Well,
screen.
I love SP. The SP was so good. That was such a good system. The design.
Yeah.
I don't want to go into that, but that is a great system. So yeah. I think. I would have been okay with the older sprites. I think it would have given me more of a serious vibe to the game. But honestly, like when I played the GBA version, it was so lighthearted that I don't know. Like even the Dark Dragon bit, like it felt like not that serious. And Dark Soul felt kind of goofy to me. The whole game felt like a little bit silly, but it was still fun. It was fine. Um, so yeah, I think I don't have any more points. I kind of want to go into rating this and kind of wrap this episode up. I want to first have you guys do your rating, and then I'll do mine at the end. We'll start with you, Mike. Like if you had to rate this game on a scale of I don't know how many party members. I was going to say how many party members in the game. I don't know how many there are. Let's just say 1 to 10. Like what would you give it?
I think I'd give this like an 8. I think it's a really solid game. I think it's worth it. I think if given the opportunity, I think the Game Boy Advance would be the less frustrating way to play it. Just for some of the fixes to interface stuff. I think either way is worth it, especially for enjoying more of the tactical elements to it. And not doing that thing that a lot of other RPGs do of you're going to have a party eventually, but you'll spend the first hour or two by yourself. Like someone necessarily, it starts off with like four other characters early on.
Yeah. And then what about you, Patful?
To be honest, the game, it is a product of its time and it shows in a lot of ways. I don't know how well I would say the game has aged all that well. So it doesn't feel fair to give it a numerical rating, which is already something that I am not the biggest fan of doing to begin with. But if I had to say whether I would recommend it to someone, I'd say, like, if you're looking for an introduction to the tactical RPG, just something very simple, something charming and lighthearted, I would say you could do a lot worse than Shining Force 1.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. So for me, I mean, Sonny, did you want to rate? I know you haven't really played it, but did you want to?
Yeah, well, I would say that if you're interested going into retro tactical RPGs, kind of see like the early days of the genre, or just simply have an introduction to the kind of cult classic Shining franchise, then yeah, I would recommend giving Shining Force a try. I would strongly suggest going with the GBA version because, well, it's more improved. They actually added some extra story and some other quality of life improvements. I know that the Shining franchise is kind of, while it's kind of forgotten, it is still a pretty popular franchise in Japan with Shining games there. Even just a couple of years ago. So yeah, I would recommend it. I think, especially if you're like someone that's kind of daunted by the RPG genre and wants something simple and straightforward, um, then yeah, I would recommend it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good advice. I think you're right. Um, so for me, I've played only a handful of tactical RPG games, and that's going to be Vandal Hearts. I think this game, and that's going to be like Final Fantasy Tactics, and so I don't have a huge experience for this genre, but going in, it was a bit refreshing for me for it being so complicated, like some of the games that the other tactics games where you have to learn mechanics. Like you pretty much play this game and you learn the mechanics like in the first couple like battles. Like you're like, oh, I pretty much have this down. With maybe a few nuances, but it's not complicated, but it's still fun and it's still satisfying. And the cast of characters you get is great. The graphics, at least for the GPA, are great. I can't speak on the original because I know I didn't play the original, but the game was fine. And I'm not going to say it's one of the greatest games of all time. I probably would not put it on that pedestal, but I think the game is worth at least giving it a try for most people. And if I had to give it a rating, it would probably be like a 7, and I think that's like a fair score. I think it's good. I don't think it's bad, and I think it's mostly good, with very minor bad things. And so a solid 7. Should you reload the game? I would say yes, 100%. Especially if you like tactical games, you're gonna love it. Probably. I can't say guarantee, but you're probably gonna love it. And yeah, no, I enjoyed it. It's one of my, out of the 3 tactics games I played, it's not my favorite story, but it might be my favorite combat. So yeah, it was good. Solid game. All right. So now I like to give people the opportunity at the end, if they have socials, to kind of plug them for, helping out with the episode. So let's start off with you, Pathful. Do you have any socials you like?
Just the same as last time. The NeoCity site, I have Apple's Lair. Again, very dated. I still need to update everything on it just because it contains a lot of character lore and such that doesn't really apply anymore. But otherwise, yeah, I plugged that. I don't really have anything else.
Okay, great. So NeoCity sites, I have never used them before, but you know what I was thinking? I was thinking of Neopets when you said that. I was like, Neopets. I haven't I haven't messed with them in a long time. Um, yeah, cool. And
NeoCities
then
is basically NeoCities is basically a sequel to GeoCities.
oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah,
And then what
it's like
about you,
a
Sunnyside?
cross. Sorry,
Yeah.
Sorry, no, I didn't know you. Continue. My bad.
you're good. I was
Yeah.
just gonna say it's like a cross between GeoCities and early MySpace in terms of like user interface, and I will leave it there.
All right.
Well,
And then Sunny.
I'm always a fan of older style internet, so yeah, I definitely want to check out NeoCity sometime. I wonder how many websites actually use it though. Anyway, as for me, socials, just kind of the same as usual. I have a Ko-fi profile that people can support me in my channel on. It's called SummerSetBanjo. I have a YouTube channel called SummerSetBanjo where I try to upload videos twice a week and stream roughly 4 times a month if I can help it. And I am a big lover of video game trivia, music, movies, comic books, all kinds of stuff. I am working on a Star Fox fan comic, and I'm currently looking for interested writers and artists that'd be willing to volunteer their time for it. You can get in touch with me on DeviantArt, Tumblr, and Twitter, and they should all be under the Somerset Banjo name.
Awesome. Awesome. Sounds good. And yeah, Sunny Somerset Banjos / Sunny Side here. He's been very helpful with the podcast, so I'm always happy to have him on. He's a moderator in the Discord. He's helped me a lot there too. And yeah, I definitely would encourage you to check out his work. And then yeah, last but not least, we got Mike. You want to tell people about what you about what you do? You want to tell them where to find you and kind of what you do again?
Yeah. So the podcast I do, which our second episode was Shining Force and Shining Force 2, is covering games that are available on the retro games available on Nintendo Switch Online. So it's called The Old Switcheroo, Gaming Retro with Mike and JMO. Easiest way to find that is www.theoldswitcharoo, ROO.com/follow. That'll give you links to anywhere you would like to find it on podcast players. It'll have links to our social media. And then outside of that, I'm on Twitch at Lobaka1977, LOWBACCA1977. and there I'm streaming what we're playing for the games that we're going to be covering for that. So it's a hodgepodge of retro games as I go.
Okay.
Perfect.
Do you also cover other types of retro releases on the Switch, like arcade archives?
We've done a little bit of offshoots on that, or things that have worked their way in. So like Zombies Ate My Neighbors and Ghoul Patrol we talked about, and we've done a few others that are on there that are still retro games, but on there. But it's mostly been everything that's covered within the one service.
Okay. Just curious.
Yeah, name the old switcheroo. That's like a solid name to go by. It's easy to remember. So awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah, go check out Mike's stuff. Huh?
I like it as a
Oh,
name.
I just thought it was cute.
We only have the problem that there's two different ways of spelling switcheroo. So we have it with an A. Yeah, but you can. There's either switcheroo with EROO. We go with aroo.
You ought to have a kangaroo as the mascot.
I feel like we should figure out how to lean on that somehow. It's also just really weird if I need to break the switch off to have it be an E, because then it's a weird sound. So
I thought switch up go like with this better in my opinion, but maybe that's how I thought it would be spelled. Okay.
That's how we spell it, and it has been a long-standing thing from my co-host of there's another way of spelling it, and it's like, no, I think we picked the right one.
I think so too. But yeah, thank you guys so much for coming on. I'm glad that we got to share our experiences with Shining Force and compare and contrast the GBA versus the original. And it was a lot of fun. And you guys are awesome. Thanks for coming on and spending your valuable personal time to do this podcast.
Thanks for having me.
It was a pleasure.
Well, folks, that's game over for this episode of Retro Reloaded. Thanks for joining me on this retro adventure. If you loved today's trip down memory lane, then consider helping me keep the nostalgia alive by supporting me on Patreon at patreon.com/retro reloaded. You'll get early episodes, bonus content, and a chance to pick the next game that we reload. Feel free to let me know your thoughts about the podcast, and until next time, keep those controllers charged.